Ren Weschler, artistic director emeritus of the Chicago Humanities Festival, draws on his latest book, The Uncanny Valley and Other Adventures in the Narrative. The Uncanny Valley is a term coined to describe how it seems to become more difficult to create a pleasing computer-animated or robotic face the closer you get to making it lifelike. Somehow these faces seem to repulse and disturb us as they become more accurate. Ren will explore the ever-increasing revelations dug up from the Uncanny Valley, such as the importance of factoring in quantum mathematics of light scattering, and how in the world of computer-generated images, it can be easy to make a dinosaur, but difficult to make a glass of milk. This program was recorded on November 5th, 2011.
I want to talk to you today about the digital animation of the face, something you might not have realized is the most fascinating thing going right now, but it actually is. It happens to be the title piece to the book that we're talking about called Uncanny Valley. So rather than any long-winded introduction, why don't we just start out? Faces hit walls all the time in the movies, as you know, but this is different. The wall these filmmakers keep running up against, or so I'm repeatedly being told, is the face itself. Digital animators, that is, in their quest to perfect ever more believable computerized simulations of a human being, a credible cyber actor moving through time and space. Bodies, walking, talking, standing, running, slouching, brawling. It turns out that's not that hard, and you've seen it countless times. For example, quidditch matches turn out to be easy to do. Or war scenes from Troy. It's easy for them to do bellies, legs, hands. What I love about this hand, by the way, is the dirty fingernails. But there's something about faces. That's just creepy. That come hither look that makes you want to not come hither at all. A believable human face, a credible face in motion, and what's more, emoting. Damn it, but that's proving tough. A hard nut, a daunting massif, and some are beginning to wonder whether it's even conceptually, theoretically possible for this massif to be crossed. I was given this assignment originally by Wired magazine about 7 or 8 years ago, and why they chose me, I don't know. I'm basically a fraud in everything I cover. I just have to do, I'm a quick study. But as I was flying out at the time to talk to these people, and they're almost all in Silicon Valley and Los Angeles, I was put in mind of a person I've talked to, some of you who've been here regularly, I've talked about one of my favorite characters, Nicholas of Cusa. Nicholas of Cusa was a great medieval number mystic. He was a diplomat, he was the Archbishop of Cologne. He was also a great theorist and wrote a book called Learned Ignorance. And he was in an argument, basically, this is late Middle Ages, early Renaissance. He was in an argument with Thomas Aquinas about how to get to God. And Thomas Aquinas basically, as you know, he's an Aristotelian, and he basically said, you know, if you catalog all of God's creation, if you do, you know, whole treatises on flowers, on animals, on procreation, on ethics, on aesthetics, if you catalog everything, that's a way of getting to God. And Nicholas responded in this book, Learned Ignorance, by saying, well, isn't it kind of like a circle with an n-sided polygon, regular polygon. So just imagine a triangle, and you add a side, you get a square, and you add a side, you get a pentagon, and you keep adding sides, and pretty soon you get something that looks damn like a circle, a million-sided polygon. By the way, here is Robert Mangold's version. Can you see why this is so deep? This is a deeply, deeply paradoxical and cool version of this idea by Robert Mangold. If you notice, on the right side, the polygon is on the inside of the circle, on the left side it's on the outside. So this is technically not quite right. But anyway, it is the idea. And we've got that buzz, we can probably lower the... Thank you. But the idea basically was that if you had a million-sided polygon, in Aristotle's sense, you'd be getting very close to God. But Nicholas of Cusa said, wait a second, that can't be right. I mean, because a circle has no sides. And this thing you've created has a million sides. A circle has no angles. This thing is really clunky thing. It has million angles. He said, no. At some point, he said, you have to make the leap. He coined a phrase, the leap of faith, which Kierkegaard subsequently took up, from the chord to the arc. And that, in some senses, is as difficult and easy to make from the triangle as it is from the million-sided polygon. And it is made, he said, in grace. But this is seen to me to be the profound digital problem, that anything digital is a million-sided polygon and is that far from reality. And it's the problem that they're always having. Anyway, tell you one thing. These guys who are trying to do this are having a great time, and they are almost all guys, by the way. One of the first people I went to talk to was a guy named Henrik von Jensen at Stanford. And he was doing research about how light bounces off objects in the world. And so I went to visit him. I was told he was really the guy to talk to at Stanford, full professor, and he runs up to his blackboard and he says, hard surfaces are easy. He says, that's all just basically this kind of thing. It's a very simple calculation. A hard surface, a hard opaque surface, the light hits it and bounces off, and it's very easy to do. You can do it on your laptop, and it's the kind of thing that makes, for example, plastic toys or ant carapaces or dinosaurs really easy to do, relatively speaking, and that's why that was the first breakthroughs in digital animation, were those sorts of things, because it was simply laptop kind of mathematics to get the light right. This is hard. This is really hard, he says, and in fact, this is what he spends his entire life doing, is animating a glass of milk. It turns out, he then threw at me a 20-page essay that looked like this, that the formulas for light as it enters a glass of milk are quantum mathematics. In other words, the light hits inside and starts bouncing around all over the place inside the glass of milk. And if you don't do that right, well, here, I'll let him explain it to you. This is going to have some sound on it.
Familiar materials look completely wrong without subsurface scattering. Opaque milk looks more like white paint than milk.
What he's talking about there is the way in which, and this, by the way, takes supercomputers to do. At the time, and now isn't quite as big, but you sure can do it on your laptop. The way in which light enters, bounces off atoms, comes off at odd angles. If you don't get it right, you end up at one time he said it looks like a stalk of chalk. I think the analogy with paint is actually a little bit better. Let's look at that again, just to show you.
Familiar materials look completely wrong without subsurface scattering. Opaque milk looks more like white paint than milk.
And the reason that's important is because the whites of your eyes are exactly the same dynamic as skim milk. And if you get that wrong, it looks like people have marbles in their eye holes and not regular eyes. Furthermore, white skin, by the way, we'll talk about this later, as opposed to black skin, white skin is filled with this problem. Black skin is much easier. It's much, for various reasons. But in any case, I spent a day with him, at the end of which he gave me one of my favorite quotes that I've ever had as a reporter, and I've done some pretty crazy reporting. He told me that dinosaurs are easy, milk is hard. Anyway, the way that light hits a face, no matter how complex and time-consuming the requisite programming needs, is nothing compared with the subtlety and the complexity of the way light radiates out from the inside of that face, the light that is of consciousness. Her face lit up as he entered the room. model that. There's actually a wonderful essay on this problem by Jean-Paul Sartre, of all people. There's a face I'm going to let you look at for a few moments. Sartre, in a very hard-to-find essay, and if anybody wants it, just write me a note and I'll send it to you. It's a great, great essay on faces. He starts out by trying to explain what is it about a face that is so remarkable, and he compares a face with a marble bust. Sartre himself invokes a marble bust in his exploration of the face so as to heighten the contrast. By the way, it's interesting about marble busts. I'm going to save you from that image because Jensen also had stuff to say about marble busts. Here comes some sound. Oh, no, let's get back. No, he'll be back on that in a second.
Traditional lighting models assume that light reflects only at the surface. As seen here, this produces a hard, computer-generated look. In contrast, our model correctly simulates the spread of light through the material, which blends surface features and leads to a smooth appearance.
So what he's saying, do you see the difference? And what he's saying, and that, by the way, is why marble is such a wonderful thing for doing busts, because marble is like the way light radiates off of a face. But anyway, Sartre, let's have a show of hands. How many would rather have this up for a few minutes or rather have Sartre up for a few minutes? We'll leave it this way. Okay, fair enough. A marble bust, Sartre suggests, exists in universal time, which is to say the time of instants set end to end, of the metronome, of the hourglass, of fixed immobility. Such a bust, he says, floats in a perpetual present. But the face creates its own time within universal time. Against that stagnant background, the time of living bodies stands out because it is oriented. In the midst of these stalactites hanging in the present, the face, alert and inquisitive, is always ahead of the look I direct toward it. A bit of the future has now entered the room. A mist of futuriety surrounds the face, its future. The face, Sartre goes on to insist, is not merely the upper part of the body. It is corporeal, yet it is different from the belly or the thigh. What it has in addition is its voracity. It is pierced with greedy holes. The greediest, the most ravenous of these holes, of course, being the eyes themselves. For now the two spheres are turning in their orbits. Now the eyes are becoming a look, and in so doing, changing the very nature of the thing they are looking at, say that chair over there. A change that is in turn reciprocal. If I watch his eyes, I see that they are not fastened in his head, serene like agate marbles. They are being created at each moment by what they look at. Which, by the way, is something you can see. There's a person at the very back corner, and I can see that you're looking at me, and I can see it because I see the tiny. Think about how little of my visual field. I can see where the whites of your eyes are. I can see the dilation of your eyes, and that tells me from years and years and years and eons of evolution that you're looking at me. If you're bored, I can see that too, because your eyes dilate differently. And think about the amount of the visual sphere that is taking all that in. That's another problem with this. But anyway, if we call transcendence, back to Sartre, the ability of the mind to pass beyond itself and all other things as well, to escape from itself that it may lose itself elsewhere, then to be a visible transcendence is the meaning of a face. To be a visible transcendence. That phrase, to be a visible transcendence, is Sartre's way of saying, and at the same time granted emphatically not saying, having or expressing a soul. And try animating that. And in so trying realize, of course, that the very origin of the word to animate is the Latin word for soul, anima. The anima, to animate is to ensoul. And it's one of the core paradoxes of the challenge these guys are facing, that it turns out to be relatively easy to animate a line, the line sketch of a mouse, a digital plastic toy, a puffball monster doll, or a cyber ant, and much, much more difficult to approximate, let alone actually achieve, a synthetically ensouled, realistically rendered human face. But we don't have to, one of the guys said to me. Our job isn't to simulate an actual human face with 100% fidelity. Our job is merely to fool the audience. Once you believe it, we're done. Not that that's proving that easy. There are hundreds, thousands of tiny details that need to be gotten just right. And one of the ironies of the work is that success is gauged precisely to the extent that it all goes unnoticed. Another of the people at Industrial Light and Magic I was talking to said, "We fail when the audience notices anything." Ed Hooks, an actor and acting coach who lately has taken to coaching animators, marveled at their contradictory challenge as seen from the other side, the receiving end of the process, noting how you're telling people, be amazed, but don't notice. In a phone interview I had with Hooks, who's actually based here in Chicago. Are you here? No, okay, anyway. He was telling me, when I'm coaching an actor and he asks me, should I raise my eyebrow here? My reply is likely to be, I don't know, don't think about your eyebrow. Think about the emotion you're trying to convey, and the eyebrow will take care of itself. By the way, Walter Murch, who I'll be speaking with next week, I really urge you to come to that talk. I teach a class at NYU on the fiction of nonfiction, and there's always a point in the class where I say, Walter Murch is the smartest person in America, and that will be on the test. The question will be, who is the smartest person in America? The answer will be Walter Murch, 10 points. Anyway, Walter Murch is the great, great film editor and sound editor. He did Apocalypse Now and the the Unbearable Lightness of Being and The English Patient and so forth. And he was talking to me about blinking one day. And he said to me that blinking isn't just to moisten your eyes, that blinks punctuate thoughts. And that when you're an editor and looking very carefully at actors, the good actors blink at the end of the thought. The bad actors are thinking, did I nail that last sentence right? And blink at the wrong place. And it's one of the ways that we know that somebody isn't paying attention is that they're blinking at the wrong place, even if they're talking to you. But especially if an actor does a great, Stella, Stella, and then starts his next sentence and blinks, he said, God, did I nail that Stella? He says that with a good actor, you always edit on the blink. And with bad actors, you can't edit on the blink and it looks wrong. Who knew? Anyway, but coming back to Ed Hooks, he says that with actors, you say don't pay attention to where you're blinking or where your eyebrow is. But with animators, it's the exact opposite. You're building from the outside in. Bits don't experience emotions. The emotions get conveyed exclusively through such things as a raised eyebrow, which in turn has to be precisely calibrated, raised, but okay, how much and to which degree, and so forth. These are all details that have to be gotten right. Here are some of the things I found out across a couple days in the animation trenches. Anger is signaled by a heavy brow, but a heavy brow can likewise signal mere intentness. The difference is in the upper eye muscle. An eye blink is more than the top lid slicing downward. At the same time, the lower lid gets pulled up and in toward the nose bridge. Eye pupils converge toward the nose as they gaze into the distance. Watch me. I'm looking at Richard Gray, but that's intolerable, so I'll start looking higher up. And do you see when I look at him, did you see that my eyes go in as I gaze out? From a distance, one gauges where someone else is looking, as I was telling you about before, by the combination of the shape of the eye, i.e. the way the surrounding muscles are pressing in on it, and the disposition of its whites. One gauges how that person is feeling the same way. Close up, the really tough thing to get right with the eyes are the semilunar fold and the corincula. That right there is really hard. Which is to say the overlapping tissues surrounding the little pink nub pressed right up against the nose bridge. They move along with the pupil, as for that matter, does the entire upper lid. Get those wrong and all you'll get is a robotic approximation. Not all the skin on the face has the same texture and elasticity. Everything depends on the underlying bone, the muscle, the fat, and integument, not to mention the skin itself. Hence, facial skin doesn't pull and crinkle the same way all over, and each patch therefore requires a different algorithm. The physics of saliva sloshing around in the mouth turns out to be identical with those of tempest-tossed seas in the perfect storm. And you can use the one to model the other, or the people at Industrial Light and Magic did. The folks over at DreamWorks went to huge lengths to get the uvula inside Shrek's mouth exactly right, thrumming and vibrating away, even though predictably it ended up being entirely obscured in black shadow. When a mouth opens, it doesn't just open like a garage door. Rather, owing to the stickiness of caked saliva, there's a sort of unzipping effect toward both corners. The way you can tell a true smile from a faked or forced one is that in the one, the upper eye fold lowers slightly every single time, and it doesn't in the other, and this cannot be faked. I'll repeat that for the married among you. The way you can tell a true smile from a faked or forced one is that in the one, the upper eye fold lowers slightly every time, and it doesn't in the other. The face is the one place in the body where muscles don't necessarily attach to bones. Often muscles fold on top of one another, one into the other, a fact that presented enormous challenges to the early anatomical dissectors who found themselves mangling whole systems the moment they sliced through the skin. And it also explains why for current animators, arms and legs are so much easier compared to faces. This is easy. That's hard. More recent research, through scrupulous video observation, live dissections as it were, has yielded, according to the most prominent practitioner of the art, Paul Ekman, a facial action coding system featuring 46 numbered muscles capable of producing over 5,000 different expressions. To really get the face right, you have to model it in conjunction with the whole body. Otherwise, you can get a weird effect where the body seems to be saying one thing and the head another. The same splay of muscles will communicate different emotions depending on the color of the skin. If you program white skin and black skin with exactly the same expressions, it turns out looking differently. And that's not to mention hair. Don't get me started on hair. Don't get them started on hair. That's a whole other essay. The point is that these guys have already noticed a lot, and every day they're noticing more. Now, moving forward. There's two basically different approaches to animating the face, and to all animation actually these days. The one is the kind that was done, for example, and now we come to Shrek. The one is the kind that was done with Shrek. And this is basically where you build a model, the skull, you then figure out how the muscles would work, you figure out how the skin would work on top of it, and you basically do all that work, and then you set up a kind of dashboard of being able to move things around. And the result is this sort of thing, and this is one of the few women, Lucia Modesto, who describes how they do Shrek. This has sound. Sound?
That people, you look at the scene, it looks a little bit more believable. So what we do is that we get the body of a character and we put all the joints, which is like putting the skeleton inside, putting the muscles, putting the skin, making it deform, putting all the animation controls so the animator can go in there and say, oh, I want to bend the arm, or I want to raise the arm, and they just go to a control called bend low arm, and they put something in there, and we do the inside of all that stuff. We build all the software underneath to give those controls for the animators. Also, it's just for the animation of the body, animation of the hair, some of the clothing set up, and all the facial animation.
This has got to be a little bit like those McDonald's cash registers, lower hand, raise hand, a whole dashboard of these commands that you can play with. One day when I was with her, she demonstrated a point that she was making, and she showed me two different furrowed brow effects on a 3D rotatable cyber model of Shrek's head splayed across her computer screen, one of which took into account the bone ridge underneath the brow and the other which failed to. At which point she said, the second is obviously wrong. It fails to take account of his skull, which of course stays in place as the muscle and the skin slide over it. He has a skull in there, she stated emphatically, before pausing sheepishly. I mean, not really. Actually, it's just numbers. Anyway, so there's that kind of thing. And by the way, there's been some retrospective work done in this field by an artist named Michael Paulus, who has been able to determine Betty Boop's skeleton and Charlie Brown's skeleton and many others. You can look up Paulus, Paulus, and find out more. The other kind of thing, so the one kind of thing, and basically, in a certain sense, this sort of animation that we're talking about here harkens back to the traditions of marionette puppetry. You're pulling strings. You pull the muscle, you pull the skull, you pull, and so forth. Only here, you're marionetting dozens of facial muscles, one on top of the next. More strings, more commands are getting added with each new generation of characters. And it's easy to see how down the line, things could get hopelessly tangled for the marionetteer. Wittgenstein once suggested that the philosophy unties knots in our thinking, hence its results will be simple. But philosophizing has to be as complicated as the knots it unties, and of course it's the same with the animators. I was reminded, as this was all being described to me, of a time I was in LA with a lighting director, and we were watching the sunset over the Palisade in Santa Monica, just an incredible, one of those great LA sunsets, you know, purples and mauves and greens and all kinds of crazy effects, and the sun finally dipped into the sea, and this lighting director turns to me and says, "God, it's incredible the effects that guy gets with just one unit." And it's incredible effects we get with just one unit. You know, it's incredibly complicated when you think about how that's done. Anyway, and some people are trying to get around this completely. There's a whole, and this is actually the more popular way of doing this now, which is called facial capture. It's a kind of motion capture. And these are what we call the pox guys, where they put points on the actor, and then they film them, and then they are able to get rid of the actor and just have the points, and then they connect the points with lines, and then they're eventually able to do this sort of thing. And the great thing at the time I was doing was, the great breakthrough at the time, this will show you, this was only 7 years ago, was a film called Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, which was a film based on a video game. But this is how they did it, and you'll see what it looked like.
This is how people move. This is not a representation of how people move. This is really a new kind of animation.
Notice, by the way, the old guy is much better than the younger people. We'll talk about that more in a little while. One of the things that's very funny, by the way, about the notion of motion capture is the more dots you put in, the better it's going to be. If you had one for every cell, for example, it would be really good. But it reminds me a little bit of Borges's famous story about the land of the cartographers, where the map making had become so good that the map of the province took up an entire city, and the map of the country took up an entire province. In fact, within a generation, the map of the country took up the entire country and corresponded with the country at every point. And then, of course, this was realized this was kind of hopeless and stupid, and they just abandoned the art altogether. And now the maps are inhabited by beggars and camels in the nether reaches. Similarly, the way you ask that question of these animators is, why don't you just use actors? And they all uniformly say the same thing. Shh, don't tell them. We don't know why they don't. But if they did, we'd be out of a job. This is a lot of fun. Don't say that. So I tended not to say too much of that. Anyway, this in turn, though, brings us to the most fascinating problem with digital animation of the face, which is the problem of the Uncanny Valley, which was first expressed by a wonderful man. You don't get to hear this phrase very often in a lecture. The famous Japanese Buddhist roboticist, Masahiro Mori, who, oddly enough, there are no photographs of him online. So that's my photograph of him. Anyway, he came up with the notion pertaining to robots of the Uncanny Valley. And he said, if you make a robot that is 80% lifelike, that is fantastic. You make it 90%, that's great. 95%, it's heaven. 96% is a complete disaster because it has entered the Uncanny Valley, by which he means that at 95%, it is a really, really, really lifelike robot, and at 96%, it's a human being with something weird, something wrong. Now, the thing that's interesting about robots as a whole, as the Uncanny Valley, is relatively narrow. If you can get through it, if you can get to 98%, you're basically fine. The thing about the face is that if you get to 99.9999999% right, it is incredibly icky. More icky, the better you get. Because two things. First of all, the faces are incredibly complicated. But secondly, we are incredibly attuned to faces. Arguably, in the same way that the brain is the most complicated thing, the human brain is the most complicated thing we have encountered in the universe, the face is the most complicated part of our body, without doubt. And we are also more attuned to faces than to anything else. So you have a terrible problem with the Uncanny Valley in that regard. It is interesting that in some cases we're now using digital animation, or will be using digital animation, to solve the obverse problem, which is dealing with people who've been so Botoxed that I originally put him up before he died, but they are now incapable of doing certain facial expressions. And so you use digital animation to render real expressions of people who can no longer do it themselves. There are other kind of uses for this. For example, here's something, it's just showing some of the recent uses of digital animation. One of them is that you can take old actors and do things. Well, here, let's watch this. Turn up the sound.
Monroe never said,
I know what you mean.
in this movie, but image metrics can make her say it or anything else.
I know what you mean.
Say, Fred, you can even choose popular brand name drugs.
But generics are cheaper.
I guarantee you, Fred and Ethel never sold prescription plans.
They don't tell me what to do?
They do now.
That'll be a refreshing change.
You can also, here's one of the more recent things, and one of the more creepy things, by the way. Watch this.
For those with ears, let them hear. For those with eyes, let them see.
Look how bad the cheeks are.
GravityDesignStudios.com. We speak for your business.
You'll notice there that the ears are wrong. The ears are really hard to get. The cheeks are all wrong, and she's not speaking for my business. There was an interesting film that was coming out just around the time I was doing this reporting at the time, which kind of came and went, but it was pretty good. It was by the guy, it was directed and written by the guy who had written The Truman Show. I don't know if any of you saw it, called Simone, but it's really Simulation 1. And it had to do with with Al Pacino inventing a cyber actor, the first real cyber actor. And what was fascinating is they had to find an actress with all kinds of Botox in her mouth to create the right effect. I should, by the way, just take a side thing here. I once had when I was working here, I had a friend who worked at Playboy, now on the coast, and described how, though this is top secret in Playboy land, but that you can imagine, that the one thing that Hefner still to this day supervises is the centerfold, and he will. This is back 40 years ago. She would see the centerfold corrected proofs come back, and he'd circle a wrinkle here or a pimple there, all these things that had to be removed. And that would make a great museum show, by the way, Richard. Richard, I'm giving you that as an idea. Hugh Hefner's collected proofed playmates. But what's so fascinating about that, in turn, is that gets women themselves to have operations so their bodies look more like the playmate bodies that he himself is doing this stuff with. So there's a kind of endless maw and vertigo that happens there. But in this case, they had to find an actress like that in the end. So I'll just show you some scenes from the previews for that film. Here we go.
And the lies that have a life of...
Oh, shoot. I'm sorry. Let me go back. I'll start that over again.
And the lies that have a life of their own.
What's the matter, Victor? You look so sad.
There was another one that, let me go back.
virtually perfect.
The star is digitized.
Are you ever going to tell the truth about me?
I'm going to tell the truth about you after your next picture.
And then but it is this problem where they had to find somebody who looked kind of weird to begin with. It's interesting, by the way, in other forms that you hit the problem that I was talking about before. In the case of Shrek 3, the animators had gotten so good doing Princess Fiona. They were incredibly proud, and remember that's done anatomically. That's they had dialed it up so fantastically. And then they showed it to a room full of 5-year-olds who broke out in tears crying because Princess Fiona was so creepy. And they literally now are dialing back from what they can do so they don't get that problem. Anyway, that was pretty much where I was at the time that I had written the piece. And in the meantime, there's been all sorts of movement forward. And of course, the major thing that people keep talking about is Avatar. And James Cameron, for his part, had taken motion capture up 5 or 6 levels. And he himself claimed that he had crossed the Uncanny Valley, for example, in this clip right here.
Before he could do that, Cameron first had to make sure his technology could cross what's known in robotics and animation as the Uncanny Valley.
Let's say this is an absolute human, and this is a, kind of a talking moose. As you approach human, our attraction to the character goes down. And then at the last second, just when you get to a true human look, it goes back up. Well, we needed to get on the far side of that dip in the response curve, which is called the Uncanny Valley, and we needed to get to the opposite side where we don't have to necessarily believe that it's 100% photoreal, and we don't have to necessarily believe that they actually exist, but we have to believe in them as emotional creatures. And so we came up with the head rig. We call it the head rig. It's basically just a kind of helmet, very tight conformal kind of skull cap that's based on a life cast of the actor's head and a laser scan. So it fits very tightly and smoothly and comfortably. And
it's funny, by the way, notice that the Na'vi have dots on their faces, which is a throwback to how they were done.
And then, there's a carbon fiber boom that comes out with a little camera on the front of it. And that camera shoots the face in a nulled out close-up. So even though the actor's moving all around, running, jumping, yelling, screaming, jumping off stuff, jumping over logs, running flat out, whatever, we're getting that facial performance absolutely locked off.
And from that, they were able to record every facial movement, from the actor's lips to their eyes.
And that proved to exactly be the kind of holy grail approach to how to do CG faces, not the stuff.
No, it didn't. First of all, notice that the skin is blue. It's very metallic blue, and hence you're back in easy. That's easy. That's no problem. Milk is hard. Na'vis are easy. Milk is hard. The other thing that he's getting away with is that any kind of creepiness you'd have, you say, well, no wonder they're aliens. So that's totally cheating. Having said that, things are continuing to get interesting in this field, and actually most interesting in many ways in digital games rather than digital films. And LA Noire people there's a digital game series called LA Noire, and they have some interesting things to say. Watch this here.
For a long time, we've been able to make buildings that look good. We've been able to make cars that look very real. The level of realism goes up and up and up. With previous kind of technologies that you'd use, like facial motion capture, we didn't really ever feel that we could pull that off. You could never really tell whether someone was lying or not. With this technology, what you see is what you get.
I'm always happy to help the LAPD.
Three is a detective story, so the believability of the actors' performances is key to gameplay.
I love the Da Vinci.
That's one of the key strengths of our system. We can actually see all the subtle features that animation traditional ones just can't do.
Cole Phelps, traffic. What have we got? It's really acting a scene.
What's fascinating about this guy, by the way, is he looks like a robot before. That is the plainest face I've ever seen in Hollywood. But anyway, let's. I'm sorry, I don't mean to make ad hominem attacks here, but.
In two parts, the motion capture and then the motion scanning.
lines, and as they talk, they get processed and turned into 3D.
And action.
So the guys' names that I've been seeing doing the repairs on the heaters, they're fully licensed and accredited.
We go from 2D videos to 3D meshes.
I think you're lying, Rake. I think some of your men aren't fully licensed.
To compressed versions for the game.
I think some of your men aren't fully licensed. You're desperate to cover your sales.
The level of detail is just so high.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's really interesting. Here's a good place to talk about black skin and white skin. Watch this scene here. Oh, excuse me, let me just...
You sold the drugs to Cornell Tyree and Tyrone Lamont.
Oh, I sell fried steaks and black-eyed peas.
Isn't that interesting? The white skin really is very, very off. Black skin is they're somewhat better. And, oh, by the way, just because, so you won't have to go through all this. I did. You get the.
I had to think about this long and hard at the beginning of this process and say, are you deluding yourself, or do you really think that you can do all those things? And I decided, hey, I might just be able to pull it off. The jury's still out.
What I love about that passage is, first of all, why not use the film? But secondly, it's self-referential. They're talking about whether or not they're going to be able to pull this process off. The jury is still out. And once again, one of the things that's very interesting about black skin is it looks white. When the light on it makes it look white in a bounce-off way, but on white skin, it doesn't work the same way. Anyway, I've made that point. I just want to show you some more recent things that are kind of interesting. And this first one here, watch this. This guy is making that guy's face do those things.
Brown Brian beats his big brother Bobby with a baseball bat.
What's interesting about this particular company is that the same guy can do a young face, an old face, a male, a female with that same equipment. Watch this. But the old guy looks better than the two on either side. There are two reasons for this. Old skin does... Oh, shut up. Yourself. Anyway, the old skin does tend to lose some of those things that make animating younger skin more difficult. It loses a little bit of the quantum stuff. But more to the point, we're used to old people on screen being caked with makeup. And so that old people on screen always have that kind of bounce, and so it doesn't bother, and that with the kind of makeup that younger people don't have on screen. So that's one of the reasons you get that. There have been all kinds of interesting little breakthroughs, such as this one here. One thing that's fun to watch here is they're taking the same face and doing it different ways. And watch, when they do it with eyes straight, it looks lifeless, but when they get the eyes to start moving, here's an interesting thing that is coming out of France. And note the ears are wrong here, but otherwise it's pretty amazing.
Vous voyez une image. C'est une image de moi. Pourtant, cette image n'a pas été filmée. Cela me ressemble.
They took a photograph of the guy and did that.
Et pourtant, je contrôle ce que je dis. Je contrôle la façon dont je le dis.
And the ears attached to other actors. So they're all, did you notice how they were all wrong? They didn't go up and down the way they should. Let's see if we go here.
Ce n'est pas moi. Et pourtant, je contrôle ce que je dis. Je contrôle la façon dont je le dis. Je contrôle mon apparence.
Et je contrôle que tu disparaisses. Here's an interesting character. This is one of the more recent.
Stress maps, which we triggered from the face robot.
The guy up in the corner is doing the animating.
These stress maps would also be triggered, which would create wrinkles and subtle details.
That guy is doing that.
That we see and we love and push the animation bar a lot higher as well.
With the addition of Face Robot, Autodesk has done a great job of providing the best tools for facial animation.
Now, the best one that I've ever seen and I don't have the animation itself. It was just 12 seconds long, and I'm still working to get it. It's deep, and the reason I don't have it is it's deep, 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 deep in the bowels of Industrial Light and Magic, Lucasfilms. This is 8 years ago. Elsewhere, if you get the current issue of Popular Science, I have a rant about the perishability of digital stuff. And they may have lost this forever just because it's 6 or 7 years old. It's so deep in the computer that they can't find it anymore. But this was a little tiny animation about a character called Hugo. It was 12 seconds long, and the guy in its entirety said something like, "You're talking about me? No, that can't be. It must be the other guy. It must be the other guy who's not real." And it was so riveting. The narrative caught you, so it was so self-referential and so riveting that you completely ignored that the ears weren't going right, that the cheeks were wrong. The point being that basically narrative, voice, will carry you over the Uncanny Valley. If you turned off the sound when you watched that, it didn't work. Looking at it from the other side, we had Bob Sebastian here a while back. He's a guy who did Through a Glass Darkly. He does some of those commercials on TV. But what he does is he will take a bit of film and he will give 30 seconds each to 25 different animators. And the result is incredibly lifelike, even though obviously not exactly the right thing. So let's just look at this quickly. Sorry.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay. What do you think about astrology?
Well, there might be something in it, but the thing is, when you meet an astrologer, they will tell you 2 positive things and 2 negative things, and one of them is going to be all right. If they knew, why did they not know that there will be a tragedy on September 9? All this, I don't buy that. You don't accept it. If you want to accept it, if you say it is true, the way you think, your destiny is made each and every moment. The way you think, the way you feel, and the way you act. Your destiny is made each and every moment. It depends upon the quality of your thinking, feeling, and action.
I would argue that the presence of the human hand makes the human face much more believable. I think that was much more believable than most of the things we were seeing, than the Navi and things like that, just because it had the human interaction with the human face. It wasn't digital interaction. And finally, we're getting toward the end here, this goes back to the thing that's the most emotive, the most powerful is Felix the Cat, Mickey Mouse, just little doodles, little piece of paper, or most recently, Marcel the Shell. How many of you know about Marcel the Shell with shoes on? I'm going to show, this is like the stupidest, goofiest, lousiest animation ever done. It is extremely simple, and I believe more believable than anything you've seen so far today.
My name is Marcel. Oh no, that's not the first time I've done that. My name is Marcel, and I'm partially a shell, as you can see on my body, but I also have shoes and a face, so I like that about myself, and I like myself, and I have a lot of other good qualities as well.
And then just, it's about 4 minutes long, but just to give you like 1 minute of it here.
My one regret in life is that I'll never have a dog. But sometimes I tie a hair to a piece of lint and I drag it around. Come, I love you. Come on, come. His name is Alan. Guess where I found him? Under a tooth. Well, you know what they say. Lint is a shell's best friend. Do you want to watch me try to lift this? Sure. All right. No, I can't lift anything up at all. Sometimes people say that my head is too big for my body, and then I say, compared to what? Here, come here, come here, come here. I love you, come here.
Now, what I want to suggest to you is that what's going on with Marcel and that piece of lint is exactly what's going on with us and Marcel. We project love onto the simplest things. And we do it when we're little tiny babies with that stupid little teddy bear we have. And I mean, my daughter and I now go around and say, "Look, I love you." But that projection, that embodiment in a voice, in a narrative, is what gets us across the uncanny valley and nothing else. No amount of digital technology. That little thing you just saw was on the other side of Cusa's circle, whereas the Na'vi are stuck in the land of a million angles. Years ago, and this isn't going to date me, I guess I was 29, and I went back to my elementary school, to my kindergarten, and I wanted to see what jokes were being told on the playground. And for 2 days at recess, I would hang out with the little kids on the playground and ask them to tell me their jokes. You can never do this today, absolutely never. But anyway, so it's anthropologically significant what I'm about to tell you. You'll never get this research otherwise. The jokes were exactly the same jokes that had been there 25 years earlier when I was there, told with exactly the same oblivious insouciance that they were told by me and my friends. Mommy, what, sweetheart? I earned $1. How'd you earn $1, Sally? The boys meant me I wouldn't climb the pole, but I did. Oh, silly, they just wanted to see your underpants. Ha, well, I fooled them, I wasn't wearing any. Ha, 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 ha. Told by a 5-year-old. And I began to think that, in fact, it's the jokes that are the life form on this planet. That certain jokes live at LeMay Street School playground, and that the rivers of humanity going through just happen to be the medium in which they live. The same with stories. You know what? There's not a thing after this, so I'm going to go a little tiny bit long. I'll tell you the whole story here. There's a great Hasidic story about a time of pogroms, and they're terrible pogroms, and the wonder rabbi goes to a special place in the forest, and he lights the fire in a particular way, and he does a particular prayer, and he says to God, "Surely this must be enough," and it is enough, and the pogroms end. The next generation falls to his son to do the same thing, and he doesn't know the place in the forest. But in his backyard, he lights the fire the right way, and he does the prayer, and he says, "Surely this must be enough," and it was enough. The next generation, it fell to his son to do it, and he didn't know how to light the fire. All he knew was the prayer, and he did the prayer, and he said to God, "Surely this must be enough," and it was enough. Another time happened, and it fell to that man's son, the great-grandson of the original rabbi. And he didn't know how to, he was in his room, and terrible violence outside, and he said, "God, I don't know the place in the forest, I don't know how to do the fire, I don't know the prayer. All I know is the story, and surely that must be enough," and it was enough. God invented man because he loves stories. Probably the other way around as well. Or maybe narrative invented all of us, couldn't do without us. Hallelujah, amen. Thank you.